Hi there, this is the second part of the 4.05 Read Aloud, starting with A Presidency Derailed and the Rise of Popular Politics. In his first presidential address to Congress, John Quincy Adams laid out an ambitious nationalist agenda. He called for generous federal money for building roads, bridges, and canals, a larger navy with funding for scientific expeditions, the creation of a national university and an astronomical observatory in Washington, and an aggressive drive to build public schools. To fund these projects, Adams proposed a tariff on manufactured goods, as well as the sale of some of the government's large land reserves to settlers heading east. Adams promised Congress that the swelling tide of wealth from land sales would be made to reflow in unfailing streams of improvement from the Atlantic to the Pacific. It was a bold plan of action, but partisan politics consistently got in the way. Anger over the stolen election derailed almost all of Adams' initiatives. The election controversy sharply redrew political lines. Those supporting Adams' administration organized into a new National Republican Party. They squared off against Democratic Republicans, or Democrats for short, who supported Andrew Jackson. Given the intense party bickering that consumed his term in office, Adams was unable to drive his legislative agenda through Congress. The legislature did pass a high tariff on manufactured goods in 1828, which led to a further resentment of the president, particularly among Southerners. Everyone was looking to the 1828 election, which Andrew Jackson framed as a struggle between the virtue of the people and the executive privilege. Jackson avoided spelling out his position on such key issues such as tariffs or internal improvements. He simply campaigned as a man of the people. In many ways, the years from 1824 to 1828 witnessed the rise of modern American political campaigns. The two parties now openly and vigorously campaigned for the popular vote. In New York, Martin Van Buren organized supporters for Jackson. From his headquarters in Tennessee, the Jackson campaign churned out biographies of Old Hickory, the Indian fighting general who had stood down the British at New Orleans. The campaign even had a theme song, The Hunters of Kentucky, which emphasized the candidate's rough-hewn Western roots. A group of Jackson supporters, known as the Hurrah Boys, stirred crowds at barbecues, parades, and rallies. They emphasized the candidate's log cabin upbringing and his willingness to fight for the common man. Campaign posters proclaimed Jackson the man of the people and contrasted him with Adams as a privileged elitist. Both sides played dirty. Adams' men spread harmful rumors, partly true, about Jackson's marriage. Rachel Jackson, the general's wife, had been married to another man and was not yet divorced when she tied the knot with Andrew Jackson. Jackson claimed that neither he nor she realized this, but her divorce was not official until after she and Jackson were wed. Though based on fact, these rumors of bigamy were painful to the Jacksons, whose long marriage was marked by deep affection. In turn, Jackson's supporters tried to stir up the outrage of evangelical voters by claiming that President Adams had traveled through Rhode Island and Massachusetts on the Sabbath. They also said that Adams had bought royal extravagances for the White House, including a billiard table, which the president had indeed purchased, but from his own funds. One observer quipped that the long campaign of 1828 was a struggle between John Q. Adams, who can write, and Andy Jackson, who can fight. When the election came round, voter turnout was extraordinary. Out of a population of nearly 13 million, more than 1 million Americans cast ballots. Most states had recently dropped the property requirements for voting, so the expanded electorate included many new voters, factory workers, small farmers, shopkeepers, and even some free blacks and women who owned property. Also by 1828, all but 2 of the 24 states chose their presidential electors by popular vote rather than leaving the choice to state legislatures, thus further expanding popular participation in the political process. In the end, Jackson won 56% of the popular vote in a comfortable victory in the Electoral College. Because of the enormous interest and heated emotions that two parties stirred up during the campaign, more than 3 times as many Americans cast ballots in 1828 as compared to 4 years earlier. The dawn of modern politics with mass participation and popular forms of campaigning had arrived. The man of the people takes charge. I never saw such a crowd here before, remarked Senator Daniel Webster of Massachusetts on the day of Andrew Jackson's inauguration. Persons have come 500 miles to see General Jackson, and they really seem to think that the country is rescued from some dreadful danger. Before taking the oath of office, Jackson electrified the crowd with a deep bow to the assembled gathering, as if to affirm he served them. After the brief ceremony, thousands flocked to the White House for an unprecedented general reception. Some were appalled by what one observer described as the rabble, a mob, scrambling, fighting, romping, in the White House, standing on chairs, eager to get a glimpse of their new president. But the Democrats were pleased. The muddy carpets, toppled chairs, and broken china seemed a small price to pay for the triumph of popular democracy. Old Hickory's background. One of Jackson's frontier neighbors declared that if Andy Jackson be president, anyone could be president. There was little denying that Andrew Jackson was a different sort of politician from what Americans had previously known. Standing 6 feet tall and weighing a bare 145 pounds, Jackson was a gaunt, agile man with a thick mane of sandy hair and piercing blue eyes that terrified his opponents. Ill-schooled and hardly able to master the basics of spelling and grammar, Jackson had risen from the log cabin poverty of a Scots-Irish family to a frontier congressman, to senator, to state militia general, to territorial governor, all the while building a reputation for his fiery temper, stubbornness, and penchant for violence. He sported a scar from his defiance of a British officer who, during the Revolution, had ordered the teenage Jackson to shine his boots. A veteran of several duels, Jackson suffered chronic pain from a bullet that lodged next to his heart, where it still remained, and from a shot to the shoulder, where he suffered in a gunfight with the Western politician Thomas Hart Benton. His friends affectionately referred to the general as Old Hickory, a testament to his tough and steady demeanor. The start of Jackson's presidency was marred by the passing of his beloved wife. Dressed in his habitual black suit, white shirt, black tie, and beaver hat, Jackson donned a black armband to commemorate Rachel. The president blamed his political opponents for Rachel's death. He believed their attacks on her character drove her to an early grave. This conviction hardened the new president's resolve to take action against his elitist enemies. The spoils system. Although Jackson had not been specific in his campaign promises, he called for reform that would give ordinary citizens greater opportunities. One of his first innovations was a new practice that he called rotation in office, but which his opponents labeled the spoils system. Jackson believed that government office should not be monopolized by an elite few, whose posts continued from administration to administration. To the victor belongs the spoils, his supporters proclaimed. The new president, they argued, should be able to appoint people to federal offices as he saw fit, which generally meant to fellow party members and supporters. In his first year in office, Jackson removed 919 people from federal positions, roughly 9% of all government employees, and replaced them with Democratic Party loyalists. He saw this as a healthy turnover and an expansion of opportunity. To his critics, the president was rewarding political favorites at the expense of experienced civil servants. The government, complained one opponent, formerly served by an elite of the nation, is now served to a very considerable extent by its refuse. But Democrats countered that Jackson was making the government service more accessible to ordinary people. All right, I want to go back here a few pages and read this little excerpt. The torch passes. On July 4th, 1826, an ailing Thomas Jefferson, 83 years old, may have been able to hear the sound of cannon fire and music from his bedroom window at Monticello. It was the 50th anniversary of the signing of the Declaration of Independence, and his home country, as in towns and cities across the land, citizens were celebrating the birth of their nation. Some time before, he had penned a message to be read at the Washington, D.C. celebration, reminding Americans that because of the Revolution, all eyes were opened or opening to the rights of man. The Revolution made clear that the mass of mankind has not been born with saddles on their backs, nor a favored few booted and spurred ready to ride them. On the evening of July 3rd, Jefferson stirred from his bed and asked, "Is it the 4th?" These were the last conscious words he was ever to speak. The next day at about 1 p.m. he passed away in his sleep. A few hours later, at his home in Quincy, Massachusetts, John Adams whispered, "Thomas Jefferson survives." Then Adams, too, was gone. Riders set out from Monticello and Quincy, bearing news along the coast that Jefferson and Adams, lions of the Revolution, had passed away from the scene. Astonishingly, the couriers arrived in Philadelphia at Independence Hall, where it all began, at the same time to announce the deaths. An awestruck crowd took pause to remember these giants of the founding generation. Okay, let's go back to our lesson. Okay, so we completed the reading. Okay, after you finish the reading assignment, complete the 2 different elections activity. So let's look at this. So it's a little quiz thing. So like, for example, Andrew Jackson won the popular vote, but not the presidency. In which election did that happen? That was the first one of 1824. Correct. And then just keep on going through your review questions until you reach the end. Okay, suppose you had lived during the time period of 1828. Would you have voted for Jackson? Okay, this is talking about your essay that we are not doing, so we don't have to worry about that. And then we're not worrying about it, so then we're done with today's 4.05 lesson. Yay! Have a great day, everyone.